It's Friday, and I'm back with the next in our Fanzine Friday series. Today we're taking a look at Tempestuous Orifice, number 2. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer. This is our channel, Old School Rules, a place for everyone who loves classic RPGs and anyone who'd like to learn more about them. Each week on the Fanzine Friday series, I take a fanzine from a collection off the shelf for a closer look. Today, from the early days of 1983, this is Tempestuous Orifice, number 2. Hope you enjoy the video. We're back this week continuing our look at a fanzine called Tempestuous Orifice. It comes from us from the United Kingdom in the early 80s, and principally responsible for producing this fanzine, Steve Norledge, Patrick Fama, and Chris Davies. And they don't give us a month, but the last one was 1982. This one's 1983, so I think it's early 83. They tell us it's planning to be a quarterly fanzine, so we're going to assume this is sort of the first quarter fanzine. Art here on the cover is by Richard Harris. Richard Harris, and you can see that one has a little bit more of a sci-fi theme, and they make clear in their discussion, the editorial, they're not just a D&D fanzine. We'll talk a little bit more in this editorial about their philosophy and approach to what games they're going to cover, but clearly this cover takes a little bit more of a sci-fi approach. In terms of and so this one is still just a paper cover, obviously white paper, just folded in half, staples down the side. We have an editorial, an article on bandits in your fantasy role-playing game, pretty good. Massive truths about Bushido, the role-playing game. The quest for wine, woman, and song, which is a little snippet describing a recent campaign event of theirs. In the beginning, which talks about how to sort of start your campaign, session 0, if you will. Robots and Traveler, film reviews of recent cinema, Cave of Illusions, which is the D&D adventure, which is the continuation of the Runequest adventure from the last issue. King Herbs, which are using herbs in your fantasy campaign, and Role Players Fight Back, which is Steve's comment on the importance of role-playing in your games. Again, Steve, Patrick, and Chris, principally responsible. Richard Harris does cover art, rear cover art, and some interior art. And article contributions also come in from Jonathan Lewis and Mark Wilsher. I think some of the interior art is done by other people, but they don't give any credit to anybody else. So that's the best I can do in terms of telling you who the contributors are. The editorial this time has a few things to say. The first one is they say you should note the new typesetting technology we have, like just from the title up there, the different sized font and so forth, which, again, we don't think about today in the age of computers, but back then it was a big deal to improve your technology in terms of the quality of your printing that you could do. So they're very excited about that, what they call letra set. And then to what's going to be in this fanzine, they sort of say Biggles, which is a reference to Simon Billinus, who does a fanzine called 20 Years On. I have those. We'll look at those at some point. A lot of that, maybe all of that fanzine really is telling you about other fanzines, what they are, what issue they're on, what they cover. And they say in 20 Years On, he basically says that this fanzine covers lots of stuff other than D&D. And they say, look, we need to clarify that because that's not really our philosophy. We are a D&D fanzine. They say principally because that is what the majority of people who buy fanzines, role-playing fanzines, are interested in. They said, and we certainly want to cover other things, but we are not a non-D&D fanzine. And they're sort of a little concerned, we might have the best non-D&D fanzine, but then we're going to end up with a very small circulation of people who don't want that, only want to look at other games. And they said it's really not what we're trying to do, so they're trying to clarify that. But as you'll see here with Runequest and Bushido being discussed, they clearly are going to cover other things too, but not excluding D&D. That's certainly, as they say, going to be an important part of their focus because that's where the hobby is. They do mention 20 Years On, Simon Billinus, if you want to get that, and they encourage you. They say, and I think it's right, does a real good service. I mean, myself, someone who loves fanzines, finding something like that talks about and lists all the different fanzines that are out there is really helpful, sort of research tool, I guess you'd say, or help me collect. They also mentioned getting a copy of a fanzine called Saga, the Swansea Adventure Gaming Association fanzine, which they say is very cheaply priced at 20 pence and 20 pages, and is a pretty good one they suggest you take a look at. That comes from Ken Dent, or at least that's the point of contact. All right. Bandits, very good article. And the bandits article is, again, giving you some thoughts about how to think about bandits. And the main takeaway for me in reading this was, I probably should use bandits more in my fantasy campaign. Because they say, look, bandits would have been out there, right? There would have been people who sat along either, they talk about this in two different ideas. There's the wide open areas like the desert, the steppes, places where you can see for a really long way, and you're not going to be able to basically set up an ambush. And how bandits would behave there, which is sort of having large groups with sort of a secluded home base and scouts who could identify a particular target from a far distance. Yes, they might be identified as well, but look, this, say a caravan's coming across this wide open plain, and the way the bandits will attack essentially is going to be in large number to overwhelm with speed of horses and to overwhelm the caravan, right? And they'll surround you from a distance and try and pick you off maybe with charging arrow volleys on horseback or something like that, and only sort of move in when they have vastly superior numbers and can hopefully convince resistance is futile kind of thing, right? And that you should give up. The other type of bandits, they say, are along, like say, typically through a forest or a wooded area where they're going to basically be able to use ambush. And so these guys, they say probably not on horseback because horses make too much noise. I don't know that that's true. But their idea is, that they will have a lookout who can see you, alert the group. They can attack more on even odds because they will set up in a place where they have cover, behind trees or rocks, maybe from greater height versus the roadway or whatever. And that they will attack in that way from behind cover, trying to pick off again, the people, at least the resistance that they see there. And they also talk about thinking about the alignment of your bandits, because you want to determine whether they're basically just going to kill everybody and take everything, or are they the kind who are going to try and see somebody who might have some value, capture them to get either information or ransom out of somebody and decide, do I kill you or let you go, that kind of thing later. I think the main other takeaway from this article is just this idea of there should be bandits. That should be a regular sort of part of your character's experience in your game, right? Because again, it's fantasy, but in a lot of fantasy fiction, brigands or bandits of some sort are really a common presence there, right? And you can have the Robin Hood guys who are sort of merry, happy fellows. You can have the really nasty ones. They can be smaller, they're larger, etc. All kinds of different motivations and personalities and opportunities. It doesn't have to be just always a combat to the death either, right? So anyway, I think that's a good takeaway and something to encourage you to think about as a referee or DM in your campaign. Jonathan Lewis has a review of the game Bushido, which was put out in a couple different editions through the years, but really, really good. And what I haven't read this. I think I have one of the two books maybe I picked up somewhere, but that they're just really, really well done. Most people are probably never going to play this game, both because it's a little bit complicated in terms of the rules, but also in particular because you're just not going to find a critical mass of people who are excited about just constantly playing a campaign that's set in Nippon, which is their sort of fantasy version of Japan. But I think if you're interested in that, maybe better than Oriental Adventures that was put out by Gygax later on in the 80s in terms of rules and a way to think about that type of campaign, whether you want to pick take a character class that's in there and create a really interesting NPC that comes from a far off land and give your characters, in a D&D setting, something completely different. But the kind of thing I think everyone who reads it really enjoys reading these rules and thinking about it, even if they're not going to play it. The Quest for Wine, Women, and Song, and it's the story of a recounting of a campaign evening that this guy had. This is Patrick Fama's article. And it talked about this guy, Maftron, who's essentially a barbarian, not very savvy, comes to town looking for adventure, ends up sort of getting hoodwinked first by a prostitute who takes all his money. He wakes up with nothing, and then hey, you're in Apple Lane, which is a Runequest scenario. If you go to the north end of town, there are these skeletons, and if you can defeat them, there would be a reward, and that's a way for you to get some money. He meets this guy who is clearly a thief, who says he has enough money to buy him a sword and a shield, and they go together to the north side of Apple Lane to try and clear the place out of skeletons. They manage to do that. the next morning, he unintelligently leaves the good stuff with the thief, who he says, you'll take care of this because I'm going to go, spend some time with another prostitute, but I won't have anything for her to take. And the thief, unfortunately, doesn't wake up early enough to skip town with all the goodies. And so the barbarian shows up and is like, hey, I'm here for my good stuff. And then they meet up with another guy who's going to help them out in their next adventure, and that's kind of where it ends. So just a little home campaign. Chris Davies, I think, has a good article which says, look, DMs, give a little thought to how you want to start your campaign. Could be a really important way to develop the role-playing, develop the characters, and really get them into it. So don't start with, it's session 0, the classic, you meet at a tavern, and here we go. So he says you really want to give some additional thought to something a little more unique, a little more interesting, to give your characters something that's going on. Maybe it's a motivation, maybe it's a little bit of a story specific to each one of them, or something that maybe causes them to come together and gives them something that'll get them motivated to get into that first adventure. He also says don't overlook the value of using religion. If somebody is on a common quest, they've been sent by, if they all have the same religion, or at least can unite behind someone's religion to say, we've got to go get this holy relic, and we're all good aligned, and this will be for a good deity or something like that. And so he points, to Chaucer. Familiarize yourself with that concept. Read, I think it's Boccaccio's I'm going to missay that, Decameron. Ancient adventuring type of text to give yourself some potential inspiration. I think the main thing is read, especially that sort of Appendix N pulp fantasy stories from the 50s, 60s, 70s. The stuff that Gygax cites in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Lots of really good ideas you can pick up there. Okay, next we have a Traveler article. You guys know I don't really play Traveler, but just give you a little bit of story of the gist of this one. So this is on robots. He said, I was really disappointed to have a sci-fi game where we didn't have more information about robots, so trying to remedy that. And so they say initially there was the Galactic Council for the Protection of Intelligent Life Forms, and all robots had to have this coding put in that so they couldn't do anything that would harm any intelligent life form. They had to obey intelligent life forms unless it contradicted the first rule, and they would protect themselves unless it contradicted either Rule 1 or Rule 2. And those were the laws that were coded in to all robots. But then eventually someone said, we could actually make more money building robots and selling robots to people that didn't have any restrictions, right? So they could either be used for combat purposes or protect, the rich owner of the robot, etc. And so they started building robots without that. And they said by the time you're coming along into your game, that original set of rules is long forgotten, and now people make robots of all kinds, and they've got charts in terms of the price, different types of power systems, different types of computing technology you'd put inside of your robot, and different types of features you could give them, different types of sensing, infrared sensing, telescopic sensing, different types of combat, defenses, things like that, as well as other skills you could give to a robot. So that's the idea. Then we have some movie reviews. Tron. The Tron movie review is essentially, and they mentioned this came out shortly before E.T., and that was rushed to theaters because they knew E.T. was coming and that E.T. was going to be a bigger movie, so they wanted to get it out there. They say really, so Tron, it's special effects, which is part of what they were going for. They say they think were excellent. They say there wasn't a great story. In fact, they talk about the agonizing scene in which Jeff Bridges' character and his female co-star tenderly embrace for what seems like 2 hours. But in reality, it's only 40 minutes. And throughout this allegedly touching moment, he looks like he's more constipated than infatuated. So they don't have much good to say about the acting or the plot, but the special effects are really good. And then similar feelings about the Dark Crystal, which I always thought was a decent movie. But they say, again, it seems like something that was written in 3 days, and it was written in 3 days, and it shows that the story, again, was not the point of this movie, but it was what they could do, with using the Muppet technology, if you will, to tell a story. And they say, again, that is very, very impressive. It would have been good if they'd done a little bit more story, a little bit more development, so you actually cared about the Muppet characters than just be impressed with the fact that they could make a movie using Muppets. Okay, Patrick Fama, part 2 to the adventure, and the conclusion of the Brew Cave, which is in Tempestuous Orifice number 1. So this one, as you remember last time, you made it to the bridge. The Trollkin was going to let you stay the night, and then you'll cross over and go explore the caves. You can, and what basically they say is 5-hour trek. You easily get down the road. You can see the cave. You can approach the cave undercover. They make it really easy for you if you want to choose to be smart, to sneak up there. And you'll hear basically the Brews who had recently attacked the village. You can hear them. You can sneak up on them. You can get surprised. They won't be wearing their armor if you sneak in. And you have a chance to basically fight them and kill them. You search around this initial cave room, and you'll find basically a trapdoor underneath of a table. It has like a little circular ring you can use to pull up on it. If you do that, just using a character does that, there's going to be a trap that might get you by surprise, might even poison you. But in any event, you're going to be able to pull that up. It actually releases a hidden wall that slides us away, and then you can go deeper into the caves. Four different pathways, and you make your way along a few different interesting potential encounters. In the cave all the way to the top far right is where the big bad guy is, evil priest, and you try to make your way down there, attack him, defeat him, and end the bad guys who are raiding the local neighborhood, and you can be heroes. It's a pretty good adventure, I actually think, and easily convert it over to D&D if that's what you want to do. Next, we have an article Steve Norledge does called King Herbs. If you watch my fanzine videos on a regular basis, I recently did one that had a whole section, I think like 10 pages, of herbs and magical powers or enchanted powers you could get from them. So not something I ever really thought about, but I really like it. And now that I've got a second article I've read about it, I think all of us probably are missing an opportunity by not having a little bit of this in our campaign. He only has 5 different things to use as suggestions, but they're pretty good. And so the first one is Aliantha, and easily harvested fruit. You take them, they basically heal you a hit point by eating these little berries. And they only last for 5 days after you pick them. And they have a little bit of an enchantment. Hopefully you know the lore, that after you eat the berry, you have to scatter the seeds on the ground. And if you don't, you'll never be able to get the benefits from this plant again. If you do, then you can always stop and harvest and eat them. They say you got to put them in relatively remote areas, but maybe make it something your characters would know how to go and find along the way on an adventure, for example. Next, we have Athelis, a leafy herb. It grows in dark grottos of a forest, picked during the daytime and crushed and then boiled by a paladin, and it gives you an extra healing potion and cure disease effects, same potion, and it'll last for a week. High Wolfsbane, you harvest this and crush it, and you'll get some sap out of it, and it will cure you of lycanthropy if you have that, or give you some, it will protect you from it for a period of time. It will poison anyone who is a lycanthrope, right? So if you had a were creature or suspected it was a were creature, you mix some of this in, it'll give them 4d6 of damage, and poison effect. And you can also put it onto your silver blade or silver arrows, and sort of stick, use that and sort of get it into their body and cause that extra damage. Next, we have Devil's Nightshade. Black. They say you make this look bad. It's a small, rich black berry that'll grow in super inhospitable terrain, like the side of a rock or some icy outcrop, right? And it's basically super poisonous. If you touch it with bare skin, you can get contact poison that way. If you eat it, you're definitely going to die. And so it's usually picked by evil characters or assassins. It only is good if it'll be good for about 3 weeks, and then after that, it's going to not hold any property. It'll make you sick, but it won't kill anybody anymore. And finally, Blue Shavatha. It says it looks like tall wild oats, but has a pale blue color. Grows in plains somewhere in your world, right? You reap it, crush it, shred it, make it into a tobacco and smoke it. And when you do, it lets your spirit separate from your body, and you can go to another plane, like the astral plane, for example, for a few hours, 2d6 hours. So it obviously used for a particular purpose. They say give a 2% chance that your soul is unable to reunite with your body, and in which case you'd have to use a wish spell to do that. But otherwise, you just basically are able to go travel a plane in a sort of astral or ethereal form for whatever reason that might be good in your campaign. Okay, finally, an article by Steve Norledge called Role Players Fight Back. And the essence is essentially a response to people who are being critical of D&D and in particular saying its combat system is not realistic enough. And he says, so I've got all these people who are like, well, I'm sort of more sophisticated because I play Runequest and it has this realistic combat system, or I play Chivalry and Sorcery and it has this sort of tamped down magic system that's much better. And he says, look, if you like that stuff, that's fine. And as he sort of jabs him, it's like, if you'd rather role play or rule play than role play, then maybe you prefer those games. But he says he thinks D&D is unfairly criticized because it is designed to encourage role playing. It is designed to be sort of smooth, and you have to forgive the lack of precision or realism because that's really not the point. Same thing for some of the balancing rules that Gary has in, like for character class advancement and so forth. He says, look, those things are all designed sort of as a system to give you this very smooth game that allows you to focus more on the role-playing aspects. And so you don't want your combat to bog down and be 2 hours long because you're flipping through books and doing charts and stuff like that. That's his opinion. And as he says at the end, that's Steve's opinion and not the opinion of the other two guys who do the game. I think they both prefer, and maybe he's jabbing a little bit at them, who they prefer, I think, Runequest to D&D. But that is his suggestion. And as he says, and if you really want to get sort of smooth and loose, like Tunnels and Trolls is even, I guess you'd say, more rules light than Dungeons and Dragons. And then he's just got information about his subscriptions, the credit you get in terms of subscription, in terms of free issues for contributions, advertising, and your ability to get a back issue. He says they still have some issues number 1. Take a look at a little bit of the art. I always like to do that, get myself out of the way. There's a few illustrations. This is from the Bandits article, and this is another one from the Bandits article. Then we've got this guy from the Bushido article, and then a few other ones. We've got the description from the campaign, how to start your campaign. We got the little monk there. He's a religious icon, and a couple of drawings from the robots article. And then these are from the adventure. I'm not sure really who the woman is here who's doing the incantation with the magic globe in the middle, but then I think the one on the right is a little bit of the evil priest room. If you get to the far end of the cave complex, you come up with that. Then we have Harris's drawing here on the back page, which is this angelic figure. That's our look at Tempestuous Orifice number 2. There are 6 of these in total. I have all of them, so we'll cover the rest of them here in the coming weeks. Hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you're enjoying this series, and I hope you're subscribed. If you have friends who might enjoy our channel, please send them our way. We'll continue to build our community. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. And until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.